Welcome to the Faith and Trauma Center podcast, a unique approach to exploring the intersections of religion, trauma, sacred spaces, and mental health.
Each month, we choose a different topic to discuss weekly from different perspectives. The first week, we explore the faith, community, and clergy perspective. The second week, the mental health practitioner perspective. The third week, the perspective of individuals working to heal from religious trauma. And the fourth week, we invite a special guest who has been impacted by our monthly topic to join us.
This format follows the design of the Faith and Trauma Center's 3 pathways for resources and education. We invite you to explore all the additional material that we offer at faithandtraumacenter.org.
Let's jump into this week's conversation. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Faith and Trauma Center podcast. It is one of your hosts, Christy Love, and I am joined by my other host, co-host, Holly Madden. Holly, it is good to be back in this space with you. It's been a couple weeks since we've had a chance to record. So how are you?
I'm good. How are you? You've had a crazy couple of weeks.
I have had a crazy couple of weeks. So yeah, my one of my young adult children is a rock, well, 2 of them are rock climbers, but one of them is a rock climber who got hurt climbing rocks and really did a lot of damage to his knee. And after trying everything else, they ended up having to do a pretty significant invasive surgery. And so we have been in caretaking recovery mode for the last couple weeks with him. And surgery went well. Things were smooth as far as, the corrections go, but the recovery is going to just be really long. So yeah, podcast was hard to get to the last couple of weeks, and I've been doing a lot of work from home. But I feel good to be able to do this tonight and catch back up.
Yes, same.
Yeah. Yeah. How are things in your world?
Things are both.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I feel
Say
like
more.
I just feel like I don't know, there's just this like looming cloud of just heaviness and weight from just all the things that are going on in the world and just things that impact us, things that impact people we love, just like the grief of all of that. And at the same time, I feel like things have been really beautiful. It's one of my favorite times of year. I'm just like a nerd. It's the mental health struggle in me that resonates so much with weather and with seasons. So like transition periods are my favorite times of year because it just feels like the weather is changing and there's just so much like unpredictability and things are like transitioning into fall and we have like our first frost and cold weather night coming up and it's just like I think this really like grounding reminder for me that like there is so much even in there's like predictability, but there's still so much like just ups and downs and ebbs and flows and growth and death and life and all of that in the world and that just like resonates when it's like like we're
Mhm.
supposed to experience those things too and that's a good thing that's an okay thing so I just feel very connected in that way. It's also just been a wild season of schoolwork for both my husband and I, and like trying to do that and work full time and parent and move and all the things. So, been busy. I've got a kiddo that's loving gymnastics and a kiddo that's loving soccer right now. So those things are kind of big for us and really beautiful. So yeah, I feel a lot of Ellie calls them my daughter calls them her and emotions when she's got like she's good and bad, she's excited and angry. It's like that language to be like I can feel more than one thing and I feel a lot of those and emotions right now. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you have helped her to develop the self-awareness to name that because, you
Mhm.
know, that's an incredibly advanced emotional intelligence concept to be able to recognize that 2 things can coexist at the same time. I think I was probably well into my 20s before I could really grasp that truth and live into that truth. And so, kudos to Elle for grabbing that before she hit double digits. So
She's got a lot of high intelligent, emotional, social influences in her life. But she's also an incredible kid, so
she
she
does.
she keeps me on my toes. She keeps us all on our toes.
She also keeps asking when she can do the podcast. So one day we may have to have Elle on as a guest. So
We're going to, and it's going to be the best podcast we've ever recorded.
it will
There's
be.
no telling what we will talk about though, so.
So I know, in these last couple of weeks, as we've kind of been shifting seasons and I've been dealing with, some other things. We've also been working on some new resources for Faith and Trauma Center's resource libraries. So, Holly, why don't you share a couple of the resources that you've created, and then I'll talk about one that I just added and kind of let that maybe shape probably the rest of our conversation for today.
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to be long-winded. You can like try to rein me.
Land the plane.
I won't go into too much details. I've part of that like seasonal connection for me. I just have had a lot of energy. Also, like we've just it's been a full moon, and so I've had a lot of creative energy flowing lately, which has been beautiful. So I've added a lot that I'm just really excited about. But I've added quite a few resources that just really resonate with seasons. So we've added some resources on burnout and on like connecting to the season and the mental health track. I've added a yoga flow video that just connects with this season of fall, and encompassing like the heaviness of this time with
Mhm.
that reconnection, that call to reconnect with nature. I've added like a mini liturgy journal to the clergy and faith leader pathway that I've been really excited to share, just that poetic heart in me, wanting to just share some of those words that were written in some very heavy and beautiful times of ministry for us and working together, and wanting to repurpose those for others if that resonates. So I've added that. I'm anticipating probably this week getting to announce some of that, some live webinars and groups and things like that. I know that's a huge part of our heart, and we've been trying to navigate and juggle schedules and figure that out. So I'm excited for those, and we'll kind of announce those a little bit later. But I think the biggest one that I'm just really feeling so much energy for right now, especially as we're moving into the season of winter, and there is kind of a draw in us whether we listen to it or not. This is a season of like a lot of reflection, and then it's a season where our bodies need more rest, and we actually naturally have a sense to want to withdraw a little bit. And so kind of in that reflective, like, wanting to sit in front of the fire and read a book or something, I've started this like cute little mini journal that's like a little mini blog on our lived experience pathways. But I've heard so many people talk about how much they resonate with the the journey that I've been on like reconnecting to the wild, and in my own deconstruction, that really beautiful connection to nature and to to a spirituality that exists in the living world. And so I've decided to turn some of those thoughts and those connections into kind of an ongoing blog. There's not a whole lot of commitment there as far as like how often I'll post in there, but it's called Reconnecting to Nature, a spiritual journal. And it doesn't have to be just for those with lived experience. Like it could resonate with anyone. That just felt like the most grounded place to put that. So yeah, it's just a lot of like musings and ramblings and poetry and um, nerdy nature facts because that's my thing, and it's fun to do that. But hopefully that it can be kind of a safe place for people that just that connects to, and they kind of have that longing. They're not very long. And I've got a couple of them already started, so I'm excited to kind of keep that going, and I don't know, see who else that just builds a connection with. So those are a few of the ones that I've definitely put a lot of heart into recently. What about you, friend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I added a new resource to the clergy and faith leaders pathway this week, and it was kind of the results of a little bit of a surreal experience. So, uh, the last couple days of October, as we were all watching the clock tick closer to the kind of imminent, most likely happening, which has now transpired at the time of this recording, of SNAP benefits not being funded, right? And so I was seeing a lot of people on my social media feeds kind of talking about, I'm really worried about this and I want to help and I'm going to be trying to find some ways to donate. Does anybody want to donate with me? And like just that beautiful piece of humanity, right, that we see. And I think sometimes we get really caught up in the darkness and the division and how ugly the world can be that sometimes I think we forget those glimmers, especially at the very beginning of crisis, right? I think back, Holly, to like the very beginning of COVID when you and I were doing like crisis response in those moments with our unsheltered population and families involved in the foster care system in our community at the time. And just like this unbelievable generosity that flowed out of people that said like I feel helpless, how can I help? And so I think that human nature piece that says what can I do, right? And so I started just kind of jotting some notes down in my phone, and it was, we ran a large food bank when you and I worked together at our church plant in our community center. And it was an unsubsidized food bank, which meant we didn't get commodities from the federal government or from, the state. And a lot of that was because we were a no barrier food pantry. And so we didn't require ID. We didn't require proof of income or proof of address or any of those things that a lot of agencies require in order for people to get food support. We just kind of felt like if somebody came in and said they were hungry, we wanted to honor that and we wanted to help them. And I think running a no barrier food pantry is just a really unique experience because you really do have to rely on the generosity of your community, your ability to communicate with people, your ability to be really innovative and think outside the box because you don't have these government allocations to rely on. And so I just kind of started jotting down notes, right, of things that we learned, of donations that were particularly really helpful, things that were really popular. We also, in our food pantry that we ran, many of the individuals who came and accessed food at our location were not people who had access to running water or a microwave or a stove. And so a lot of them were individuals that were unsheltered. They were living in camps or they were cooking in hotels. And so when we're providing food for individuals who aren't using a traditional kitchen or cooking space, right, then you really do have to think outside the box a little bit. And so I just kind of wanted to challenge maybe some misconceptions or some, preconceived notions that people might have about donating to a food pantry. So I kind of put this brain dump together and I threw it up on my Facebook page and thought, maybe this will help a handful of friends and a few people. And I woke up the next morning and um, I had like 800 notifications or something ridiculous. And I was like, what the heck? And I opened up my phone and, at that point, it had been shared almost 1,000 times. And as of right now, I think it's like 4,300 times or something crazy. Um, but clearly, those thoughts kind of resonated with people a little bit. And so I took that post and then I organized it a little bit differently. And we made it into a post and a resource in the Clergy and Faith Library. It's also, you can just read all the information there in the resource library, or you can download it as a PDF. And the idea with that is, I think that there are a lot of faith communities who are saying, like, how can we help? We can, potentially host a food drive right now. And that's a great way for us to help. And if that's something that maybe your faith community is doing in response, one, this might be a resource that you could download and share with your congregation so that you are donating things that maybe are just a little bit more helpful at this time. And so, a couple of the things that we put in there, Holly, things, just simple things like a lot of people like to donate macaroni and cheese to food banks, right? Well, if we're donating powdered macaroni and cheese that oftentimes call for milk and butter, I acknowledge that yes, you can make it with just water. But those ingredients are extra on top of that. There are other products kind of, what are often like the shells with the cheese packets. That's more of like the cheese sauce that you put in there, and then you don't have to have extra ingredients, right? Or things like a lot of people like to donate canned vegetables. Well, a can of green beans is like 30 calories, right? Versus a can of vegetable beef stew, which may be several hundred calories. And so when we're worried about people's not just ability to create to cook something, but genuinely like this is what they're relying on for their caloric intake for the day. We want to make sure that we're donating items that are calorie dense, that are higher in protein, that are going to have a little bit more substance to them. And so just some of those kind of things that we don't always think about when we're shopping sales and we're just trying to stock shelves. But when we're really trying to kind of shop through the mindset of someone that may be relying on those as their only source of substance, it hopefully challenges us in how we give and what that looks like. And I shared what I called the donation golden rule, which was donate to others as you would want other people to donate if you were in need, right? So don't go clean out your pantry and donate all the things that are expired. Don't donate all the things that your family won't eat or aren't going to use. Really be intentional in that because I think that's really critical and important right now.
Yeah. And I love that you put those words together and that list together, and then it resonated with thousands of people now, which is really powerful. And I think it's a beautiful testament to just like how many people do genuinely want to help. But it's also, I think, that's really powerful testament to why it's so important that we listen to lived experience. And that's both those that are living it and those that are actively like working it and working in those places. And so, like, for those that are in those positions of advocacy, like, that's what's needed sometimes more than ever is to be able to share those stories in a way that's really beautiful, just to say, because, like, so much of that post is things that we learned because we were doing it. Like I remember the
Right.
first time like we opened our food pantry and it just like clicked because of the first person that mentioned like, do you have a can opener? And we were like, oh, we need all pop tops to pop top stuff.
Right.
Can
Right.
openers aren't something that someone can carry around with them all the time. And it's heavy, it adds to the weight, and just things like that that we were able to then tell people. And a lot of people that are like, I never would have thought of that. And empathy goes a long way, trying to be in someone's like putting yourself in someone's shoes goes a long way, but it doesn't go all the way. And so it
Right.
just we learned
Or like
we
when
need
you
to
talk about can openers, right? Like we would go and buy the little dollar store can openers, and you're right, they take up room in your backpack. They're sometimes hard if your hands are cold and you're living outside, and it's hard to turn and crank that sometimes. But then we were introduced over time to military style can openers called P38s. And, those can go, they're just itty bitty and they can go like on a key ring or something like that. And, definitely much easier, and you can buy them in bulk in places online. I've seen them as cheap as like $35 for a box of 200 of them. And so being able to, even in those things, right? Like pop tops are preferable, but if you're going to donate cans that don't have a pop top and we do need to have a can opener, larger can openers may be difficult. So let's look for something that's smaller and easier for people to use. So. Yeah, you're exactly right. We listen and we learn. And so when we're shopping from a place of privilege, who has never had to do some of those things and had to live through that, it is so critical that we're saying, what would you like to have in the space, right? What would be helpful to you? One of the things that we heard a lot, and one of the things that really resonated in that post that I shared and what showed up in the comments a lot was I had made a comment in there about if you can consider asking your pantry if they'll take dog food or cat food too, because chances are, right, if we're having trouble feeding the humans in our household, we're definitely also going to be having trouble feeding the pets in our household. And, so what does that look like? I know our food pantry, we would take big bags, we take all size bags, but we would take big bags and we'd break them down into gallon-sized Ziploc bags and then hand that out to try to make things stretch just a little bit further. And so, again, being creative and being innovative in that. And so, I think churches can really do a lot right now to help in the gap where our neighbors in need are struggling without full food stamp benefits being funded. We know that the federal government has been ordered to do at least a partial payment, and we're hearing that those will be released at some point. But that's going to depend on each state, and some states are saying that that could take weeks to still process that because their systems aren't set up to have to make a percentage change like that quickly. And so we don't know how long this could become a need. And that's the other thing, Holly, that I think I really want to talk about is we do have this human tendency that when the crisis starts to say, what can I do to help? But we also have this human tendency that our attention can quickly drift to something else. And we forget that the suffering and the struggle may be continuing for other people. Again, going back to our example of crisis response in COVID, I just think about how much food came in for us to distribute to unsheltered individuals on the streets and in our parking lot and that were living in hotels. And the first couple of months, especially, right? It was huge. But then after that, the it became more challenging to get donations, right? As people had some degree of maybe normalcy that came back, or there were other things that they got really interested or involved in. But in the meantime, for us on the streets, there wasn't an alleviation of that suffering. And in fact, the numbers grew bigger and the need was actually greater. And so you had to get more creative the longer that that went on. One of the things that we know is happening in a lot of communities, a lot of states, is that states are stepping up right now and donating and releasing additional funds to support food pantries and food banks. I was on a call yesterday here in my community, and one of the large agencies that helps to support multiple food banks in multiple counties around where I live in Washington State was talking about how many food banks are going to get a double allocation this month because they've set aside and released emergency contingent funds for this, and the states made additional funds available. So again, when we have this urgency as people and as faith communities to want to jump in and say, let's organize a food drive, the better question may actually be, what's your greatest need right now? Because the greatest need at this moment right now may not be food. The greatest need right now may be gift cards or gas cards, or it may be volunteers to come so that food banks can open up extra hours and add additional days for distribution and make sure that people get those kind of resources. Or it may be hot meals that need to be served so that families, especially those with little kids, have a place to go and say, like, hey, on Monday nights, we're going to serve a spaghetti dinner. If that would be helpful, you're welcome to come. And so I think it's important that not only we listen to individuals and learn from them, but we also listen to them in terms of what do you need right now? And what are the agencies that are on the front line responding? What do you need right now?
I love that. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of beautiful creative things that are happening, and these are those moments where creativity solves like crazy amounts of problems. And no creative like solution is really too much. Like it doesn't fit into what those gaps are. And I think of there's quite a few schools around here locally where I live that are trying to step up and meet some of those needs for those immediate families and for those that are in the immediate neighborhood. So trying to expand that reach. And so the school that I'm working in this season, like we're doing a big food drive and a food giveaway to support our families. Like, is it going to be enough for the extent of this time? No, but it's something, and that's really beautiful. Whereas the school where my husband works, one of the things they've been doing is trying to figure out some partnerships with other local businesses or organizations. So there's like a grocery store that has like they've got they cook their food. There's a what's the word for that? Like they have a place where you can
Deli.
a deli, yeah, something like that
Mhm.
where they have warm food. And there's a deli that on like certain days is offering half off to families if you've got, you just need to come in and say that you have a need. But then to be able to say like there was a thing out there that if you want to help support a family, then to have that full meal discounted, like you can donate here. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of creative things that people are doing. I think there's some beautiful things that local businesses that are local restaurants are trying to do and recognizing that some of them are putting so much on the line to be able to do that because of empathy. And so to
Yeah,
come, to go eat out at one of those restaurants and offer a really, offer a donation of some sort of a financial donation to kind of cover a certain amount of meals.
yeah,
Those kind of things I know are really go a long way right now. And so like being creative, that if like just donating food is not something that you're feeling like you're able to do, like there's a lot of other really beautiful, creative, cool ways to do that. And just
yeah,
kind of name those things.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no endless ability to innovate and to be creative, but I think, what's really important, especially again, I'm speaking to faith leaders who may be listening and trying to plan like a corporate response in this. I think something that's so incredibly critical is that not only are you listening to your neighbors and you're listening to the frontline providers, but you're also in conversation and communication with other faith leaders in your community to ask who's doing what. Here in my community, I just hosted a call yesterday, and we had about a dozen faith leaders that jumped on, and we all just kind of went round robin. What are we seeing? What are we doing? And that was, this ability for us to say, let's not duplicate efforts. Like if you're collecting Thanksgiving baskets and that's what you're going to focus on, then and you feel like you've got that under control, then let's send people who ask us for Thanksgiving baskets to you. You know, we may be doing this instead, and that's what we're going to focus on, right? So we're doing grocery gift cards, and people can sign up for $100 grocery gift card, and people can sponsor those, and we can make sure that those get out to families. And this organization over here is doing a hot meal on a certain night of the week, and okay, great, that helps us to know that, so we can send people there if they need that, and we're coordinating instead of competing with each other, right? This is not a moment, faith leaders, for you to try to worry about the return on investment and will these people ever come to your church, right? When we do that, we're inflicting a source of religious trauma into that moment, right? One of the things I talk about in my research work around religious trauma is the sources of religious trauma, 6 of them. And one of those is outreach activities. And when we come into an outreach situation or we're responding to a crisis situation and we come in and we try to do that with an agenda, right? Don't stick Bibles and don't stick tracts into your food bags right now. Don't make families sit through a sermon or a devotional, motivational scripture moment. Just feed them, just meet the need of the moment because that earns trust with people, right? That doesn't feel like a holy bait and switch. And so I think it's really, really critical that we're approaching this time with the true intention and generosity of wanting to help people and not trying to make this about, oh, we could connect with these people and let them know about our children's ministry and maybe they'll start coming to church. And that's gross. And that's not what we need to be focused on right now. And so this is an opportunity for, us to see a need, to meet a need, to embody the gospel and what it looks like to feed the hungry, where Jesus called us to do, and not to try to attach other pieces to that. I think that's really important to name.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think I want to add that I know, I think it's times like this where it just becomes so acutely aware of how far our sense of community has drifted.
Mhm.
Um, and I know I use this language a lot, but it's because it's so powerful and it resonates so much in this like these reminders that like human beings are created or designed to be community people, like to be community beings. We do not have the capability, like humans are really vulnerable when it comes to survival because there's when you look at like a grizzly bear or a Bengal tiger, like there's something very unique about humankind, and that is our sense of our ability to be connected with one another. And if you sit with yourself for a moment and like try to connect back ancestrally to like wherever your origins come from, you can go far enough back and find a time and place where people were fully dependent not only on the land and on the natural world around them and living very, very seasonally, but they were also fully dependent upon one another. And there was these sense of communities in those ancient times that were so human of taking care of the needs of one another, people who caretook those who were sick, people who took care of one another's children so that others could gather and hunt or work or whatever that looked like, people who helped to feed others. And when there was someone that experienced a need or suffering, the community would rally around. And I think that those images for me are just kind of the hope of what I and I believe that we are capable of a community again. And you see that right now. Like you see that in those businesses that are offering free meals. You see that in churches that are creating, offering um one meal one night a week now for the rest of the year. I saw a really beautiful post recently of a church that I know very nothing about that had said that they had bought a whole bunch of monthly bus passes and they were going to partner to give those out because they recognize like, well, people can't get to food banks if they can't get to the food bank. Like, here's a way to do that. And just like the beauty of that. But sometimes I think it's the judgment and the hatred and the disconnection that kind of rises above um that which is spreading around, which is very loving.
Yeah.
And I think I just like want to give you that image of like that hope, especially if you're feeling really discouraged right now by what you're seeing in your own community, maybe what you're seeing in your own church, what you're seeing in the comment section of social media, because goodness gracious, like don't read them because it's ridiculous.
Seriously.
But to just like resonate back to like reconnect back to that, like we are meant to be people that take care of one another. And in that
Yeah.
way that I would long to be cared for, the way that I've been cared for by others in
Mhm.
times of suffering, like how can I then in turn, in my own way, be
Mhm.
community to someone else? And I think that there is nothing like suffering and struggle that brings that about. But it takes us not getting discouraged by the things that are happening that
Right.
are trying to go against that.
Yeah, exactly. I think, Holly, too, about a lot of the research and the data, some of it I think is becoming more and more quantified with like, you know, more true data-based collection methods. And there's a lot of it that's just anecdotal and just talking to people and visiting with people. And it's not, you know, as faith leaders who I think are really plugged in and aware of this work, I think when we talk to each other and we're like, yeah, that's what I'm hearing too, again and again, I think one of the things that it's really important to also name is one of the biggest factors that I think we see in people pushing away from faith spaces and a cause of a lot of religious trauma for a lot of people is hypocrisy and duplicity. And it is the preaching the sermon on kindness and compassion on Sunday morning and then Sunday night railing in somebody's Facebook comments about how sick you are of people living off the government and how you don't want to support people. People see both, right? And they see that those two pieces are not congruent with each other. And I think there's a real just a shadow self that has always been a part of this Christian nationalism movement. Um, but so much of that right now, I think, has just such deep, ugly roots into what seems to be just a true, despising and hatred of people who are suffering, people who are trapped in cycles of poverty, whether those are, incidental or generational. And there's a lot of blame. There is a lot of racism that's embedded in that. There's a lot of classism that is embedded in that. We live in a country where our economy has just like really polarized so much more, where the middle class is really just kind of disappearing. And you've got, our wealthy and our ultra wealthy. And then you've got people who are struggling every day to survive. And I just think, the vast majority of people are much closer to having to go shop at a food, go get food at a food bank if disaster struck their family or job layoffs happened or health conditions happened. We're all probably much closer to having this lived reality than we are the reality of being a billionaire who doesn't have to worry about those things. And, I think it's important for us to realize that and to recognize that how we talk about these issues and how we approach these issues, is there consistency in that with the faith that we claim and with the words that we, preach and the songs that we sing and all of the things that go with it? Because for a lot of people right now, there's not. And I
Mhm.
think that's a really difficult thing to watch.
Yeah. Our society has for way too long now prided this like image of and elevated those people who reach that, who achieve that, this very egocentric, individualistic mentality that says, like, I literally am incapable of seeing and experiencing what you're experiencing, and I'm projecting what I've experienced. And it's very privileged, because it's that assumption that says, well, I've built my empire or I pay my bills because I work, get a job. Like,
Mhm.
I did this, so you need to do this. And there's this complete disconnect from the ability to see, oh, but I was born into a family that was middle class, and you were born into a family that has suffered generational poverty. Like, I've experienced, I've had access to mental health care and physical health care. I can be on medication or I can go to therapy, and that's not something that's ever been accessible to you. And so here's barrier after barrier. And that's the problem is I think so many people in that egocentric position have the power to be really incredible advocates, but they're fighting the wrong fights because they aren't able to put themselves in that place, and they choose not to. Like, it's their responsibility. And it breaks my heart that it's become something that society really elevates. And if I can,
Yeah.
I wrote something this week, a poem. I originally called it Before You Judge because it was in response to a lot of what I was seeing on Facebook and social media that was just really bothering me. And then I kind of took the title out because I didn't want that to be like, oh, I'm not going to read that because that word judge is so, people are so defensive around that. And I'm like, it's
Yeah.
bigger than that. It's not just judgment, it's that like jumping to conclusions without that ability to really empathize. So I'm going to read it because I feel like it does a better job of saying what I'm trying to say. But it says, hold on. Consider the way privilege is being born into a home with plenty rather than a home with less. Consider the way generations hand down nervous system trauma from oppression, from violence, from forced removals, and hatred. Consider the way your kindness may begin to heal generational wounds, and oh, what profound privilege it is to be a giver of light. Consider the hope that a single meal, a single coat, a single smile could bring. We live in a world where hatred is not just spoken, it's typed. So we take back power when we show up to share love. We live in an era where battles look like political wars and religious walls and comet thread venom and violence in the form of anti-human rights laws and silence. So healing looks like hot coffee, holding hands, poetic advocacy, telling stories, peanut butter sandwiches, and simply asking someone their name. Consider the way you are still breathing, and the sun is still rising, and the birds are still singing. So choose to keep loving.
Mhm. It's really beautiful. That'd be a great benediction for a worship service. I love that. You know, we're talking a lot about, obviously the social justice aspect of this. We're talking a lot about some of the religious trauma pieces of this, but I also really think it's important, you and I both share this passion for kind of this intersection of faith, trauma, and mental health. And one thing we haven't really touched on or talked about is the mental health impact of what's happening right now and what the mental health impact is of families that are struggling with fear over feeding their families and their kids and anxiety and stress. But even in terms of poor nutrition and what poor nutrition does to our brains and our neurotransmitters, and it impacts our mood, it impacts our emotional stability, it impacts our ability to process information. Um, we see higher instances of depression when we don't have good quality nutrition and access to enough calories. And so there's a connection here that I think is really important because, again, when we're naming cycles, right? And you are someone who is struggling and trying to do everything you can. And right now, you're getting caught in the middle of a political crazy storm, right? And you're suddenly be kind of inadvertently been thrust into being the pawn in this political game. Um, there's a lot of things now that are just not in your control. And we have millions of Americans and millions of children who being able to concentrate in the classroom is going to become harder if we're not getting consistent, stable nutrition. Being able to focus and retain information, and what does that look like? And um, I think these are things and dots that we also have to connect into this conversation because we also know we're going into the holidays and we see higher rates of mental health issues in November and December and January. Typically we're in darker months, we're in colder months, we're in months that are typically more isolated and alone. And so it's kind of this holistic pulling together of everything we've talked about, right? Because you've talked about, Holly, that need for community and the seasonal nature of things, but recognizing that this is happening in our country in a particularly vulnerable time that's already has a predisposition to some higher rates of mental health, of addiction, relapse, suicidality, self-harm, and some of those kind of pieces to them.
Yeah. I mean, when you are up against a threat of any kind, and when your very livelihood is being threatened because you are fearing that there won't be enough food, and this is especially true if you're trying to feed other people, if you're feeding children or you have an elderly parent that you're trying to take care of. um or whatever that dynamic of family looks like for you. Your body enters a state of fight or flight. Your nervous system is in that response, and you are wired to attempt to survive,
Mhm.
which shuts down your ability to have any like a executive function. It challenges our emotional state, and so you have high stress in people. You have people that we need to be able to access the executive function to do anything, to even rise above, make decisions, to like do things that are trying to make progress in that place. And so that's a huge barrier for people, is being in that fight or flight state. And this is a very real response. This isn't just your body saying, oh, I think that there's a threat, there's a psychological threat. This is the body saying there's a very real threat in front of us. And so to just name that too, that even the most intentional parents who are doing everything they can to like keep that fear, that anxiety, that stress from their children, kids are so intuitive to that. And they may not understand the what's happening, but they understand that there's something going on. So you have kids that are coming to school distracted because they're worried. They're acting out more. Like you have a lot of those just like domino effects that are
Yeah.
happening. You have a lot of people that are having to make really challenging decisions right now. It's getting way colder, and people that are going to decide, do I feed my family or heat my home? Do we,
Right.
make sure that the kids have brand new coats for the winter, or do we make sure we have food and we make do with coats that
Right.
might be a little bit short in the arms and a zipper that doesn't work. Like there's a lot of those kind of sacrifices and a lot of people that are going to say, I'm going to make sure my kids have what they need or my elderly parents have what they need or my disabled brother has what he needs, but I'm going to go without. I'm going to do without a full meal. Um, and I think that there's a lot of assumptions too that is important that we empathize with and understand. In the last this year and last year, I've been working inside of a school. Like I work in a preschool setting, so I am so, so, so grateful that our schools have access to providing food for kids, that there's the free and reduced lunches, that there is free breakfast here in my community. I know that there's that around for a lot of communities, but also portion sizes of those are fairly they're what the health organizations say is a portion size, but if a child is living off of that for the day, that is not enough. And I work in the preschool setting and we have kiddos that are the teacher I work with is funding her own snacks and food to make sure that kids have extra. And that's not uncommon. There's a lot of teachers that are doing that. And so I think it's just really important that there's never this mindset that says, oh, like there's enough because
Right.
I think that there's a lot of narratives that get spun for that way, but yeah, to just kind of empathize and understand some of that, that it puts there's just so much stress. And like you said, the mental
Mhm.
health pieces of that
Yeah.
at risk, but it spirals down and it impacts everybody. And
Well, and I think the intersectionality of so many other pieces are important to be aware of um, in these particularly challenging times, right? If you are dysregulated and you are on edge and you are stressed and heightened in a lot of ways, that's also typically going to make our tempers flare more. It's going to make our patience shorter. So we also need to be aware of the propensity for arguments or, fights or things to turn violent as potentials. Um, and I think one of the things that's critical for that, right, is as mental health practitioners or as faith leaders, specifically for our audience, you know, you oftentimes are kind of some of those individuals who may see some warning signs and have the ability to kind of step in and say, "Hey, can we talk?" Right? I'm concerned. I know there's a lot of stress right now. How could we support? And kind of trying to help. You can't solve all the problems, but I think sometimes acknowledging the problems can go a long way. It's adding a lot of validity. It's letting people know that they're not alone, they're not unseen. It's providing some degree of compassion and empathy. And is there a practical support? Is there a resource that we can connect you to? What does that look like? Um, do you just, need a break for a little while? Can we, connect you in a way where, maybe you and a couple of other families can come together and you guys take this night to just you know, get some respite and then somebody else gets it a different night. Like, how can we help facilitate that kind of community that's not just providing for the tangible needs of people, but is also aware and informed and paying attention to some of the warning signs that people and households may be becoming extra susceptible to the stress that is possible in these times.
um, I want to kind of on the same line of that, but pivot just for a second because I feel like this is probably, I know we're probably getting close to wrapping up, but I also want to name that if you are in a position of, I think I want to speak to those that are in healing work, those that are in creative work, like all of those things, just like how needed all of our
Mhm.
efforts and our heart and our passions are. And to the creatives, I would say right now, one of the most powerful things when you're trying to combat a lot of violence on the internet, is putting forth things that are beautiful,
Mhm.
things that are advocating for the goodness, advocating for the humanity of the need right now. And so, never discount the power of artwork, the power of poetry, the power of things that challenge people to see things differently. So often we're actually like operating out of that very like logical part of our brain, and when we add creativity to us, it's actually the same part of our brain where it's connected, it's this right the same hemisphere of our brain where there's a lot of emotion control. And so it
Yeah.
actually connects us to emotion. And so don't discount those things that you may be putting forth into the world because that's needed. And I've seen so much beautiful advocacy done through art, especially in the last several years. Um, to those in any kind of healing work, to pastors, to yoga instructors, to those that are, um, just to therapists, to anybody that's loving on people, we also need to be doing a really, really intentional job right now to check on those that are the active caregivers.
Yeah.
And when I say check on, I think one of the saddest things that I heard happen a lot in the COVID era was how many people that were on the front lines, nurses, doctors were saying like, my church hasn't checked on me. Like I
Yeah.
stopped going and because I didn't want to bring this in because I was working a crazy amount of hours because I got called to a different city.
Hmm.
They stopped checking on me. And I think sometimes there's this I don't know, there's sometimes a disconnect from like, oh, because they do this work, they're okay. And
Yeah.
right now, those that are doing this work are at high, high risks of burnout, of compassion fatigue, of their own mental health challenges, of feeling
Yeah.
pulled in directions where they have to choose work over family. And so just being really intentional with that too, that you
Yeah.
can offer offerings for those that are in caregiving roles, for those working at food banks, from those social workers right now, for those running crisis cold weather shelters and family emergency shelters and things like that. And so that work is also equally just as needed to love on and support those that are in that daily work day after day.
100%. Yeah, that's a great word. I think if you are, especially speaking to like fellow clergy, if you're sitting down and kind of looking at who's on your pastoral care radar, right? Right now, that needs to include families and individuals at risk of being hungry and going without. And that definitely needs to include those that are caring for, like Holly just listed a great list, educators and therapists and social workers. And, if you have those in your congregation, make sure you're checking on them too, because I think that's such a critical word for this time right now.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel like we have answers because the problems are large and complex and all of the things. But I do think that in processing and talking about a lot of these pieces, hopefully there are some things that resonate with you. Maybe there's a thought or an action that you kind of grabbed a hold of from this conversation, and you can take that and put it out into the world and let that be your starting place. And I think right now, the thing that we all need to be saying is, you know, let me pay attention. Let me be focused outward and not just inward. And where I see a need, let me have the ability and the courage to do what I can to meet a need. And that may not always be, the ability to provide food or finances because your own finances are challenged. But sometimes it can be a smile or a hello or an extra 5 minutes to just talk to somebody and help them to feel valued and that their image and dignity is maintained in some way during that day. So pay attention, see the needs, find ways to meet the needs. That would be my final thought. Holly, what's yours?
I would also this is probably coming from me expected, but I also think it's important to remember that sometimes our quickness to judge about those moments we have those thoughts if we our response to something we see online leans on the other side of the humanity like advocating for humanity, sometimes that's a warning sign too to us that like we're not taking care of us. And I think of just how many people respond, there's people who respond out of not being connected, not knowing, like there's a whole population there. And then there's this other population of you respond out of burnout. You
Yeah.
respond out of feeling really disappointed by society and by people. And there's a lot of those emotions that are that are connected to love. Like they are
Mhm.
all in the same field of love. And it's that I've been burned. There's grief is so big. I've been so
Mhm.
disappointed. I'm discouraged. I feel hopeless. I'm really tired. Like I'm exhausted to my core, to my bone. I don't know what to do. And sometimes our reaction then is to actually become critical, judgmental. Um, and that's a defense mechanism. And so that would be my last thought too, is just to lovingly give you this reminder to take care of you. For those who are feeling just like I'm trying to do all the things because I love people. Also just that loving reminder that you can't do it all. You're not supposed to do it all. We're supposed to do this together. And so build in time for care for you. Build in time to just connect with what fills your heart and your spirit up and find a way even when we are in a place where there's worry because it's getting colder, there's worry because we're worried about people not having food. Like we live in a magical, beautiful world and there's so much beauty and we can have the and of that. We can feel heavy and we can also sit outside and watch the beautiful supermoon rise and feel so much love and awe for that. We can go outside at lunch break and, after we've been caring for people and appreciate the leaves falling from the trees and just making sure that we're holding space for both because that helps us be fully integrated people in our brains so that our compassion is something we can activate, with something we can be able to reach for. So that
Yeah,
would be
absolutely.
my issue.
All right. Well, I hope that this conversation was helpful to those of you that are listening. I encourage you, if it was helpful, pass it along to someone else that it might be helpful for. Because I think the more that we're talking about these things in the church, in mental health spaces, the more that we're bringing awareness and we're helping to change that conversation and we're helping to change the way that people are treated and affirmed and supported in spaces. We'll see you guys back next time.